virus behind COVID-19 come from? Most maintain it jumped from bats to humans in a Chinese market. Some claim it could have other origins, in particular, a breakout from a lab working with viruses. Most maintain it jumped from bats to humans in a Chinese market.
In 2012, at a disused mine in southwestern China, 6 workers fell ill after clearing away bat manure. 3 died from a coronavirus, but Beijing covered it up and told no one.
Most intelligence agencies doesn't dismiss the lab accident theory, saying one agency concluded that account was more probable, while 2 other agencies said they couldn't reject the idea.
The Wuhan Institute of Virology, one of China's leading coronavirus research facilities.
Several staff here reportedly fell ill with influenza-like symptoms weeks before the first known outbreak of COVID-19 in the same city. But in early 2021, a World Health Organization fact-finding team dismissed the idea that the virus could have leaked from a laboratory. Instead, the WHO team concluded COVID-19 most likely originated in bats and was passed to humans via another animal. But some weren't convinced. A group of volunteer researchers called Drastic dug into the data. Drastic team members say they found documents showing the Wuhan Institute was collecting and storing bat viruses, including the closest known relative to COVID-19, and that scientists here were experimenting to make viruses more infectious while using inadequate safety standards.
That they were engaged in aggressive research and aggressive work that was making scary pathogenic viruses scarier.
China rejects the claim and points the finger at the US.
The 12th of September 2019, the virus database at the Wuhan Institute of Virology was taken offline. 22,000 coronavirus samples gone.
And when the World Health Organization team went in to investigate with Peter Daszak, they never even asked to see that database. The virus broke out in Wuhan. The bats were the equivalent of a 20-hour drive away. They were in hibernation at that time of year. You had the world's leading coronavirus reservoir at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. We knew what they'd been doing because the US had not only been funding the lab, but there had been cables sent back that warned of the safety conditions in that lab and the lack of trained safety technicians. So Richard Dearlove, he said that when that lab kicked the French out, he said this was built with the French, and then the French were kicked out when the BSL-4, the latest lab, was ready to open. He said that should have raised alarm bells about the type of research that they might be intending to conduct. In fact, even an Israeli weapons expert had named it as a biological weapons site of concern in a publicly available document as well.
And a month later, the Institute went into a communications blackout. There was no cell phone or signals activity on the compound for about 2 weeks. Cybersecurity analysts at Internet 2.0 recovered Chinese government data that had been virtually wiped from the web. It showed there was a buy-up of PCR equipment used to test for coronaviruses in Wuhan in 2019. The next month, one of those machines went to the Wuhan Institute.
We now know that they were then beefing up their security on that exact same day, putting in a new air ventilation system, a new air medical incinerator, and then the coronavirus testing machine that they purchased. And the workers who fell sick, that really is, beyond doubt that there was an incident at the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
As to the possibility of COVID-19 coming from a lab, the WHO report found it extremely unlikely. They spent just 3 hours at the Institute, and even Tedros walked away from the findings.
Oh, it's a complete fiasco, the report. It's 413 pages long, and only 3 pages are devoted to the possibility that we're dealing with a lab escapee.
So Richard Dearlove also ran into resistance to the lab leak theory. He's the former head of the British spy agency MI6. Early in the pandemic, 2 scientists asked for his help in publishing a paper that cast doubt on COVID-19 coming from an infected animal.
And it was clear to me that there was a sort of united front not to put anything in the public domain which questioned the Chinese narrative.
Censorship of science, that credible scientists who are not political in any way, shape or form had their science blocked from being published. Scientists who were shaping that narrative, people like Peter Daszak, who secretly authored the Lancet paper that came out in February 2020, he was advising the intelligence agencies, telling them that it was a conspiracy that to suggest that the virus might have escaped from a lab, when in fact lab accidents are extremely common, particularly with infectious viruses, and other scientists had been warning about this for years. It's why the Obama administration banned gain-of-function research back in 2014. The scientists who were so conflicted, who were so compromised, not only shaping the official narrative, but then going into Wuhan to do the investigation for the World Health Organization. And even Anthony Fauci, who knew about the research, he was in email contact with Peter Daszak. He kept silent in those Oval Office meetings. He never told Trump that the Wuhan Institute of Virology, this lab in the city where the virus broke out, was actually the world's foremost laboratory on coronaviruses, and that the US was funding the genetic manipulation of viruses.
We could have known in November of 2019 that there was a disaster occurring inside Wuhan, inside their most important biological facilities.
I always worry about that. As the former director of the CIA, I was always worried that we were collecting information, but we weren't able to process it sufficiently timely and get that information to the right place.
Warned that there was an outbreak in 2019, and that was both the warning from Wei Jingsheng himself, and he admitted on camera that he told the intelligence agencies that there was a coronavirus in Wuhan in late 2019. And then there was also David Asher admitted that the intelligence he uncovered, that the Wuhan Institute of Virology workers who fell sick with COVID-like symptoms in late 2019, that first came into the possession of the US government that same year, late 2019. Technical capabilities of the intelligence agencies are better than they've ever been, but the question is, did they act on that information that came into their possession? Anthony Fauci's involvement in funding coronavirus research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, that his agency had funded 60 projects at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, that he wrote a paper back in 2012 where he argued that gain-of-function research, that's genetically manipulating coronaviruses to make them even more dangerous and more transmissible, Fauci said that this was worth the risk of a pandemic. Funded research, his agency funded coronavirus research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in conjunction with the Chinese military.
It was incumbent upon us to study the animal, what potential these viruses have of infecting humans, which then might damage the United States. So you go to China.
It's unthinkable that he is still the top medical advisor to the president. Fauci didn't even tell his own boss, and that's the health secretary, Alex Azar. He didn't even tell him that the ban on gain-of-function research had been lifted in the United States.
Did he ever once mention to you that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was genetically manipulating coronaviruses?
Well, no, he didn't. And, you know, Anthony's been in government for many, many years. He's a bureaucratic kind of a guy, a very great promoter. I give him an A+ as a promoter and probably a C or a D as a doctor.
Ebola, Zika, swine flu, all familiar viruses in recent years, all originating from animal species, either domesticated or wild.
The unorganized livestock sector throughout the world, all these are reasons which are causing more interactions of wild animals with humans.
There have been well over 200 million confirmed cases of the disease so far worldwide. Yet the WHO has still only identified 4 variants of concern and 4 variants of interest. Has therefore shown that it can change for the worse, for example, by becoming a lot more transmissible, like the Delta variant. And it certainly has the potential to evolve in even more worrisome directions. The even more worrisome scenario becomes more likely as more people are infected. The more possibilities we give the virus to replicate, the higher the chances that it will eventually mutate into a pathogen that, for instance, is much better at evading immune responses in people who've been vaccinated or people who've recovered.
Imagine all the people sharing no more germs. Imagine no pandemic. Imagine all the people